Hello, and welcome to the Creative Mojo podcast. This is episode number 46. My name is Joanne, and I am the host, and I am coming to you, as I always do, from my home in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. This is my podcast devoted to my love of knitting and talking about what I'm working on and what I've finished and all those good things. A warm welcome to all my returning viewers, and a special welcome as well to anybody who might be new watching the podcast for the first time. I hope that you'll enjoy it, and I hope you'll consider subscribing and coming back to watch back episodes or future episodes or whatever's your preference. And so today is Friday, March 9th. It's been, again, about 3 weeks since my last episode. That seems to be about, right now, about the normal amount of time that, A, I find time to record, and B, I feel like I have enough things to show you to be worth a new episode as well. I've been working a lot lately, as I talk about on a lot of my more recent episodes, and so it's made it a little harder to find the time. But things are getting a little. My time is getting a little more freed up, which is great. I have been working on a show. For those of you who may not know, I'm a professional stage manager and work in the professional theater industry, and have done all my life. And currently, I'm working on a show that just opened a week ago today, actually, last Friday. And so my time will get a little bit more manageable over the next couple of weeks. It's been very enjoyable doing this show, and it was a busy week this week again because we had a couple of special things going on with our show. We did on Wednesday night. We did what's called it was an ASL interpreted show, which people do. You often will see sign language interpreters off to the side at many types of different things, including theater performances and providing interpretation for deaf and hearing impaired people. But we did what's called an integrated ASL performance, which was very exciting. It's the first one to be done in the theater community in our city here. And that meant that the interpreters were actually on stage with the actors, shadowing them. So if the two actors were here doing a scene, only two actors in the play, which is sort of what made it possible for us to do this. Two actors and two interpreters, one playing, doing each part. So the two actors were here, then the interpreters were just to the side of them here, following them about the stage and almost interacting in the scene. It was a very exciting thing. We had a pretty great turnout from the ASL, the deaf community here in Calgary. There were lots of people came to see the show, and they were very excited about it. It really provided an opportunity for them to experience and be engaged by theater in a different way than they're used to. If you think about it, so often, if you go to see a performance that's interpreted with interpreters way off to the side, you can't really watch the play that's happening here because you're having to look over here to the interpreters. So it was a very exciting experience for them to be able to really focus on the stage and look at both the actors and the interpreters and understand everything that was going on. So we had that happen this week, and that meant a little extra rehearsal in the days and doing some stuff to get ready for that. And then we've had a couple of daytime matinees. We had a student matinee yesterday, which generally when we do that, that means 2 shows per day. So, excuse me, it's been busy. But as I said, it's slowing down a little bit. The rest of life in general has been a little bit crazy. We had, as many people did, I noticed on Instagram, we're not unique in this here in Alberta, in Western Canada. I see it's been happening all over Europe and lots of parts of the United States as well, and other parts of Canada. We had a couple of extremely heavy snowfalls. Very unusual, actually, for this time of year for us to get the amount of snow that we did. We had quite a large snow dump about just over a month ago, and then about last Friday, it snowed continually for over 24 hours, and we got another 1.5 feet of snow. And on top of the 1.5 feet or so of snow that we had about 2 weeks before that, it was a lot of snow. As I said, more than we're used to. And the one day that it was snowing all day, which was I had my show in the evening, but I also had to shovel the snow 3 times in one day, which I was not impressed by. My husband is, speaking of things I'm not impressed by, my husband is actually in Mexico at the moment. He's there working on performing for a music festival. He's a professional musician, and I couldn't go because I'm working, and so he went on his own. And so he managed to fly out the morning before, the evening before it snowed so heavily, and leaving me to deal with the shoveling snow multiple times in one day, and took me another day to sort of dig our car out. We have a small car, and it was, by the time they came and plowed our street, our car was pretty much buried in the snow, and it took me a good hour of snow shoveling to just sort of dig the car out enough to move it. Anyway, you probably don't want to hear a whole lot about that, but all kinds of things that have been going on. But in and around that, I have found had some reasonably decent knitting time, which is great, and I do have some things to show you. Before we dive into that, I'm just going to start with talking a little bit about the cowl that we have going on in the Creative Mojo group on Ravelry. This is a year-long cowl I'm running. It's a patterned sock knitting cowl, and it's very easy to participate. The rules are very simple. You just have to have a pair of socks, a patterned pair of socks that was cast on after January 1st, 2018 and cast off before December 31st, 2018. So anytime in the year you can enter. There's one finished object thread. Every 2 months I'm drawing a prize from that thread. So you can enter as many times as you want, as many pair of patterned socks. They do. So the two rules are those dates. They have to be within the 2018 calendar year, both cast on and cast off, and they do have to contain pattern. That's lace or cables or texture, or color work will qualify, but it doesn't vanilla socks don't qualify. Just striped vanilla socks, that kind of thing, don't qualify. So it has to be something where you're actually putting pattern into the sock. There's all kinds of great pattern socks out there, and we had in the first 2 months altogether, I think we had around 30 entries, which was very exciting. And basically, I'm just going to draw from that same thread every 2 months. So you can keep adding into that thread, and every post from the beginning of the year is eligible. The only thing that won't be eligible is if I draw your one particular post of yours to win a prize. That particular post, if I were to draw it again, I would draw for somebody else. You won't be eligible to win more than one prize for that particular pair of socks. But if you enter other pairs of socks and other posts, those would all still be eligible. So I picked a winner for the first draw, which was the end of February. And our first winner in the pattern socks, year-long pattern socks cowl is Linda, who's had post number 24. She knit a beautiful pair of Piece of My Heart socks. Her Ravelry name is LM Cowl, I believe, LMECOLL, but it's Linda. And Linda, the prize that you're going to win for that pair of socks is a sock pattern. I would like to gift you a sock pattern by Jacqueline Salem, who is Brooklyn Knit Folk. She's got 2 patterns up on Ravelry now, and I'm knitting the second one currently, and I really love her 2 patterns, so I'd be happy to knit you either one of those 2. The 2 patterns are the Irving socks and the Clark socks. So if you want to take a look at Jacqueline Salem's Irving socks and Clark socks patterns on Ravelry and see if you have a preference as to which one of those 2 you would enjoy to get as your gift at this point. And then you can drop me a message on Ravelry. My username there is Auntie Jo, all one AUNTIE. Gosh, I can't forget how to spell. JO, all one word. And let me know which of those patterns you'd like. I will be very, very happy to gift that to you. So congratulations. And everybody keep up with the excellent work on the patterned socks and enter some more. It's obviously, if you're new to the podcast, it's not too late to start doing that. There's lots of time left, obviously, being only March. As I said, there's so many wonderful patterns, sock patterns, and there's everything from fairly simple ones if you're new to sock knitting or new to pattern sock knitting. There are all kinds of things like, say, Hermione's Everyday Sock, which has a lovely simple texture pattern that would get you started out. But there are also all kinds of wonderful detailed and beautiful lace and cable particular sock patterns, many of which I've done. I have some favorite sock pattern designers like Cookie A and people like that. So, you could give yourself a challenge and try one of those out. And if you started it now, you have lots and lots of time to work on it. If it's a challenge for you, you don't have to feel like you have to knock it off in 1 month or anything like that. So I hope you will all come and join in and play along with the pattern sock cowl. So that's my sort of administrative piece for today. Let's get into the knitting. I've been recording for almost 10 minutes now, so it's really time to get into why we're here. And I do have one finished object. This is a pair of, not patterns, I mean the yarn patterns, but the knitting was not patterned. They're just plain vanilla socks. Two of them. These, I loved knitting these. These were really enjoyable. These are from my mother. I'm on a bit of a kick this spring to replenish my mother's hand knit sock stash, which she informed me recently most of her pairs have holes in the heels now. So I'm knitting her, I want to knit her a few pairs of new socks in the next little while. And these are socks I knit 80% of at work. I do tend to knit in the booth while I'm doing my show, while I'm calling cues for my show. But the only thing I really can knit and do my job properly is plain vanilla socks, where I'm just going around and around in a circle and don't have to pay a lot of attention, and I can focus on what I'm doing for my job. So these lived with me in the booth, and I worked on them a lot during my show over the last little while. And I did the heel flaps at work, but I did do the heel turn and the gusset pickup. I would usually bring the sock home at that point, do the heel flap, pick up the socks for the gusset, and get that all done before I would take them back to work at work. But they are done. They are knit out of Arnie and Carlos Regia. I never know whether it's Regia or Regia. And their design line. Unfortunately, I have lost the tag, so I don't remember the color number for this particular yarn. But super, super pretty, and these are just lovely. I really, really love them. I knit them magic loop, top down from a cuff down, and they're 64 stitches. And as I said, they're from my mom. It's fun to knit socks for my mom. She has small feet, so they fly by pretty quickly. So that's my one finished object for this episode. But then I have several whips. I did, I have a couple of new cast-ons, and I have a couple of things I'm going to start with showing you, I did actually pick up my pattern socks again. I know saying the last episode I was bad, because here I am running this pattern sock cowl, and I had really neglected my pattern socks. But I made up for that a little bit. These are, speaking of Jacqueline Salem's patterns, these are the Irving socks by Jacqueline Salem. I'm loving this pattern. I loved her Clark socks, and I'm also really loving these, which is why I'm giving away a pair of her socks. These were actually my Christmas Eve cast on. I cast them on and I knit up to about where that progress keeper is, and then they sat in a bag from just after Christmas until about a week ago, and then I pulled them out and I did a bunch more. Finished the leg. Obviously they're really sweet with the pattern on the front, and then a much more simple garter ridge pattern on the back. I put in the heel. The pattern calls for, and I did the heel as called for. It's a short row heel. Short row heels are not my favorite kind of heel, but I just wanted to try what was called for in the pattern, so I did that. And I'm partway down the foot now. Very pleasant pattern to knit, not terribly difficult, pretty easy to memorize and know where you are within it. It's got some lace and some cables going on there. And the yarn that I am knitting these out of, this is, I have to look at my notes here, Earl Grey Fibers, Earl Grey Fiber Co. in the colorway Dickens. It's this beautiful sort of gray, but with gray and pale sage green, and some little flecks of darker gray and darker green and foresty green in there. As you can see, it's washed out a little bit, but you can kind of get the idea. So it looks gray, but when you get up close to it, you see all these lovely little bits of color in it. Really love working with this. It was gifted to me by the lovely ladies of the Cloud Society podcast. I won this in a giveaway they had. I think it was I can't remember. It was maybe a certain number of subscribers, like a 500 subscribers giveaway or something like that. Anyway, it was very exciting to win this beautiful yarn it's from a dyer who's local to them in San Francisco. So yeah, I've been working on these a bit again, and I've been making good time, and I'm hoping to get that first sock finished short order here. The heel is done with a mini I got last fall from when I went to Knit City in Vancouver, and it's a Seawall Fibers mini. I don't know the color name of it, but it's a dark gray. And yeah, so those are very enjoyable. Again, those are the Irving socks by Jacqueline Salem. And so that's my first whip that's been attended to. Excuse me, I also have a new pair of vanilla socks, work socks, that I've been knitting on for my show. These usually said live at work and live in the booth, but I did bring them home to film today and show you. This is again another pair of socks for my mother. Pretty. The variegation in this yarn actually looks more intense on camera than it does. I mean, it's there, but it doesn't look quite as intense in real life as it really pops on the camera. The sort of pooling striping that is created by the variegation. This yarn is Lanitium. I always have trouble saying that. Lanitium Ex Machina, or Machina, probably. They're a European dyer. I think she's Scandinavian. I think maybe it's from Finland, but I can't remember, but definitely Scandinavian. This is her basic sock. The colorway is called Limbo, and it's a 75%, it just says wool, superwash wool, and 25% nylon. And it's definitely, I don't think it's merino, or if it's merino, it's a merino blend, because it is not as soft as a lot of merinos. It's a sturdier feeling yarn. It might be not merino at all. It might be a Scandinavian sheep breed. It doesn't actually say, but I like it for, I'm trying to knit my mother actually some socks that are a little sturdier. I knit her quite a few pairs out of fairly nice soft merino and a little bit of merino cashmere and things. And as I said, she's been blowing holes in the heels. So trying to give her something with a little more substance and body that maybe will last a little longer. So these are a good choice. They are sturdier and scratchier feeling than a merino, but they'll be just perfectly fine for socks on your feet. And the color is super pretty. I used this yarn. I may have shown this yarn on the podcast previously. I believe this is the third pair of socks I've attempted with this yarn, but I tried patterning before, and the variegation is just too much. It really obscured any pattern, so they're working best as nice plain vanilla socks, and pretty much ready to pop the heel in on that first sock. So yeah, again, same as always, it's 64 stitches, cuff down, magic loop. I'm using Chagu needles, red lace needles on these. I really like these needles. I have to pick up a few more pairs of them. So I enjoy them for magic looping socks. And then I have a new cast on since the last time I spoke with you. It's something I've been meaning to work on for a little, or to cast on for a little bit. This is the Habitat hat by Jared Flood. It's an early pattern of Jared Flood's. I actually have knit this pattern before. A number of years ago, I knit this pattern in a beautiful bluey green color that I gifted to my father. It's a heavily cabled hat. I sense a bit of a theme here in that I've got cables on a number of projects. I'm obviously into cables right now. So the Habitat hat is cabled up and all over the pattern, all the way to the crown, with a variety. It's pretty easy. It's not a super difficult, but you do have to look at the chart a fair amount more, because it is different cables all the way around, and there is cabling on every second row. There's a rest row, and then the cabling is on every next row. So the yarn I am using for this is a yarn that was gifted to me by a friend of mine, Karen. It's Malabrigo Rios, which is the worsted weight Malabrigo yarn, merino nylon, I do believe. Might be 100% merino, I can't remember, and I don't have the tag, but and the color, which is just so pretty, is Jupiter. This is reds and burgundies and reddish browns. It's looking a little brighter there. It's a little, that looks a little truer. Actually, if I hold it back here, it's that sort of dark. It's like blood red with those browny sort of burgundy kind of tones in it. It's beautiful, and Malabrigo always makes such nice hats because it's soft. And so as I said, my friend Karen gifted me this yarn when we were working together on a show before Christmas. So I'm actually knitting her a hat out of this. I don't wear a lot of hats. It's the thing of being a curly-haired person. I only wear hats if it's so cold out that I know I really need one, and because they do tend to flatten the curls in my hair. But Karen wears hats all the time. She really loves them, and I just thought it would be great to take this beautiful yarn. She gave me 2 skeins of it, actually, so I have a second one to do something with. You'll see I hand wound this into a ball because when I put it on my Swift to use my Swift and ball winder, it was incredibly tangled in the skein, which sometimes happens, particularly with, I noticed with Malabrigo. And it ended up being easier to hand wind it off the Swift while I untangled it than it was to consider trying to untangle it and ball wind it. So it took me a little longer than it usually takes me, but looks pretty, doesn't it? So that's a new cast on. I just cast on the other day and did a bit of work on. And then the last thing I've been working on, and working on quite a lot, is a project I showed you last episode, which is my Beaumont sweater. I may have called it something Blackstone or something on my last episode. I know I wrote it down wrong on my notes, so I may have actually told it to you wrong. But it is the Beaumont sweater is the actual name. It is a pattern from Blacker Yarns, designed by Sonia Barjalowska. I am knitting it out of Knit Picks Stroll Tweed, which is a fingering weight, soft tweed. This color is Down Heather. Love it, love it. That's what it looks like. And I have finished it's a different construction on this sweater. You knit up the sleeves across the top and then back down the other sleeve first. Then you join that, you sew that up, all that mattress stitch up the inside of the sleeves, down the little bit of the side, and then you pick up stitches and knit down in stockinette for the body. I do have not great, but I do have a picture of what the sweater looks like. So you can see the top part up there, which is what I've just finished actually, is all cabled, and then the body is all stockinette. So I've finished the sleeves and top part of the body, which is in the cable pattern. Let's see if I can show you what that looks like. So that's the neckline, and I believe that's the front of the neck. I believe that sits like that. And then one sleeve and the other sleeve. As I said, you sew that up, and then you sew down this little part of the body there, and then you pick up all around there. It's hard to show this. Pick up all around there in the round and knit down in stockinette for the body. So I'm very pleased that I finished this part. I just actually bound off the second sleeve this morning. It's got yarn all over. The next step I actually have to do is I actually have to give this a soak, and I have to block it, and then I have to do the mattress stitching, stitch up at least the side seams and probably under the sleeves before I can do the body. So and the mattress stitching is not my favorite thing in the world, but I feel like if I need to press on with it, otherwise this may sit and wait for a little while I avoid doing stuff that's not as fun as the knitting. I love how it turned out. This cable pattern is really pretty. It's an all over but simple 6-row cable repeat all the way through, and then obviously increases and decreases along the edge to shape the sleeves and stuff, and to shape the neck. The neckline is really clever because it's just done with the way you do the cables right on the edge, that raw edge, but it makes it, you can see that, makes it a really pretty neckline without having to do any extra finishing on it, which is very cool. My gauge was not great on this. I did do a gauge swatch, but I obviously didn't do it very well. And I didn't wash and I did a super lazy gauge swatch and tiny bit excuse me, it bit me on the butt, because in the pattern it says that the row gauge is very important, and obviously that's because you're knitting up this way, up the sleeve and stuff, and row gauge is important to get the sizing right. So I was worried about row gauge more than about stitch gauge. My row gauge is fine. My stitch gauge was not great, and when I looked at the pattern in a little more detail and looked at the blacker yarn that was originally that the sweater was knit out of, even though it says fingering weight in the pattern, and it's certainly on the pattern page on Ravelry and stuff, the yarn that they used is a sport weight, so it's more of a heavy fingering weight, whereas this is not a heavy fingering weight. This is a pretty normal light fingering weight, the stroll tweed. It's not as wide like in the sleeves and stuff as it's supposed to be. However, as you can see, there's tons of stretch in it. So I am hopeful that between blocking and it's meant to, again, as you can see from the pattern picture, it is fairly form-fitting in the top and sleeves, and then it sort of blouses out from there. So hopefully it's going to, between giving it a bit of an aggressive blocking to open up those cables, which you can see, like it definitely stretches out to the measurements that it's supposed to be at. So we'll see how that goes when I block it, and hopefully it will fit. I mean, the rest of the length measurements are good, so it should be fine. We're gonna see. But so I'm working on that a lot. It's used about half the yarn, so I'm like halfway through the sweater, maybe even a little more than halfway, because I don't know that I will use the other half of the yarn just for the body down. The fun thing about this is once I block it, sew it up, pick up those stitches and knit down, once I get to the bottom of the stockinette body, it's done, except for weaving in some ends. So that will be cool. So yeah, that's gotten a lot of work. So then the last couple of things I wanted to show you today, because that's the last of my active works in progress. I always laugh when it's not the end of my works in progress, it's just the active ones, because I do have lots of other half knitted projects. I always do. I'm one of those knitters, right? And speaking of that, I've swatched for 2 more sweaters. I'm very eager to cast on a couple more sweaters. I'm still thoroughly bitten by the sweater bug, and both of these sweaters I was really inspired in different ways. So the first one, I had the first one I'm going to talk about is that I've had the Weekender sweater by Andrea Mowry on my to-do list for ages. I've really wanted to make that sweater, and I had some yarn in my stash that I was sort of considering for it, but I wasn't sure that I was totally sold on it. And then I was doing a little internet browsing on my phone one day, and I saw the yarn I wanted, and I was like, that's the yarn I want to knit this sweater. So I ordered it. It's here. And now that it's here, I really want to cast on the Weekender sweater. In fact, I've done the swatching for it. So let me talk about the yarn first. It's I love this yarn so much. It's Beaver Slide Dry Goods, which I've talked about on the podcast before. I have a sweater half finished in the fingering to sport weight of the Beaver Slide Dry Goods. This is their worsted weight. The other yarn I'm using is a merino mohair blend. This is straight merino, 100% merino. I believe from the sheep on their farm in Montana or their neighboring farm. It comes from right where their business is in Montana. It's actually sent up to Canada, to right near me, to about an hour's drive from where I live, an hour and a half's drive, to a place, to a mill, Custom Woolen Mills, to be milled here in Alberta, and then it's sent back to Montana, and then I bought it and it got sent back to Alberta, for which I paid a lot of shipping, which is kind of funny, but the actual price of the yarn is great, so it makes up for the fact that the shipping was a little pricey. And I got 8 skeins of this fantastic color. That's pretty accurate to it there. The color is called Snowberry. As I said, it's 100% merino, 241 yarns per skein. I got 8 of them, plenty enough to make this sweater. It is lightweight. I'm pretty sure it's a woolen spun. It's a 2-ply, and I'm pretty sure it's woolen spun because it is very, very light and lofty, and beautifully sheepy smelling. Not overpowered, not strongly, but just definitely there. You can feel a little bit of the lanolin in the wool, which makes it so nice to knit with. It feels really nice as you work on in your hand. It's going to be, for a more rustic yarn, it's going to be super soft to wear. It's going to be really cozy. It's very squishy and delightful. They said, I love the color. I don't know why, but I really knew I just saw this and I was like, I want a pink. So apparently, a pink seems to be, I seem to like pink more than I realized. Guys, I've knit another pink sweater. That was my other Andrea Mowry, actually. That was my So Faded sweater. And I've got another acquisition of a skein of pink yarn to show you here. So clearly I like pink even more than I thought I did. But this is a beautiful color with these pops of the darker sort of berry pink in there. And as I said, I did a swatch. This is my swatch. 2 different needle sizes. You see that it gets wider at the bottom because the pattern actually calls for a 5.5 millimeter needle, but it was too big. I wasn't getting gauge down there, so I went down to a 5 millimeter needle and got gauge at the 5 millimeter needle. And I like the fabric. The sweater is actually most of it with the purl side out in the sweater. It looks great there, hey? And it feels so good. This is going to be, I mean, I'm going to finish this just in time for not to wear a woolen worsted weight sweater for the winter, but that's okay. I'll have it we have enough months of winter here for sweaters to be totally valuable. Like, I would say 7 months of the year I can wear woolen sweaters, at least, maybe 8 months of the year. So, excuse that my throat is very, I can hear in my voice, I'm very froggy today, and it is because with all this crazy weather we've been having, it's been very dry here. So everybody is sniffling and sneezing and sounding croaky and froggy, and it's not a bug, it's just how horribly dry you'd think with all that snow that it wouldn't be, but actually the more snow we get here, the drier it seems to get. And it's got the point it's so dry that everything is staticky. I touch things and you can see the sparks of static electricity. If you touch a door handle sometimes, things like that. Good times. Anyway, that's going to get cast on soon. I'm dying to do it now, but I'm forcing myself to at least get the Beaumont cardigan blocking and stuff before I do. I might cast on the hem of this while that's blocking. We'll see. That's the one benefit of it being so dry is woolen things do dry here very quickly. It doesn't take 3 days to dry a sweater. I have also swatched for another sweater that I really, really want to do. I showed you this yarn back in the early fall. This is Abundant Earth Fibers, Joseph and Annie. Beautiful natural color. It is a 90% domestic merino and domestic US merino and 10% Washington Targhee. And I picked this up also at Knit City in Vancouver in early September, late September. Can't remember which now. Late September, I think. And you may have seen on Instagram or heard other podcasters talk about Abundant Earth Fiber, which makes incredibly beautiful yarn. She had a booth at Knit City, and I could have bought 3 times as much as I just bought 1 sweater quantity worth. I could have bought lots more. They had a terrible thing happen to them recently. They were going to Stitches West in California. They were driving. They're on Whidbey Island in Washington State. And they had all of their yarn, all their stock in a trailer attached to their car. They stopped overnight somewhere, and when they came out in the morning, someone had stolen the trailer, just unhooked it from their vehicle and driven away with it with all their stock. And, you know, what a loss. You can imagine. They mill all their own yarn, and they had an incredible attitude about it, that they made it before. They can make it all again. They're, you know, thankful that worse things in the world can happen, for sure, but still, you know, that's a big loss for a small independent run little company like that. And I can't imagine, you know, I sort of think about when the thieves opened that trailer and discovered what they'd stolen, as opposed to music gear or stuff from people's house because they were moving, you know, electronics and things that you probably think you're going to get when you steal a trailer. They got a trailer full of yarn that probably for them wasn't even valuable. whereas we know how valuable it really is, both in what it's worth money-wise, but also how much we value it. So it makes me sad to think about what they might have done with all that yarn. Anyway, yeah, what a tragedy that was. And you can help them out a little bit to recover and rebuild their business by going to the Abundant Earth Fiber, their website, and giving them a little donation, or you can put in a pre-order. They're building up their stock again, and you can buy something from them, and they will send it to you just as soon as they get it spun and made up. It'd be great to help them out a bit. So that really reminded me how much I loved this yarn I bought from them when I saw that on Facebook or on Instagram. And I thought, oh, I really want to knit with this. And I've wanted to knit with it, obviously, since I bought it, but I've been looking for the perfect pattern. And I thought I'd settled on one pattern, and then I thought I'd settled on another pattern. And then it was that's part of why it was languishing in my stash for a while, was because I really was not totally sold on what the pattern was. And then the other day I went to Stash, one of my local yarn stores, and I picked up this, which is issue number 4 of Lane magazine, which is like my favorite knitting magazine, I think. I love the patterns in it, but I love the beauty of the magazine, the layout, see if I can show you. This is a pair of socks by Helen Stewart. See, just the photography and the layout, and the yarn pictures in here are just to die for. Like, look at that. Oh. Anyway, there's an Isabel Kramer sweater in here. I'll try and show you a picture. The picture's a bit dark of this particular sweater, and so I'm not sure how well it's going to show up on the camera. Let's just... Oh, actually not too bad. That's the Erie sweater, E-R-I, by Isabel Kramer. And it is knit out of a sport weight. And it's got that beautiful cables and lace pattern down the front and texture. And this yarn is going to be great for all of that. And this is a sport weight, and I'm going to make that sweater with this. So I've swatched for that as well. I'm close to gauge on this, not quite, but I haven't washed this yet. So I'm going to wash it, lay it out, and see how close I get to gauge. I don't think I will change needle size. I think I will have to just make a few adjustments to the pattern if this doesn't kind of block out to gauge, because I have not quite enough stitches in the gauge, in the stitch gauge, and I have too many rows in the row gauge. So changing needle size is not going to, I don't think, change the fact that my row to stitch gauge is obviously so much different from Isabel. So what I'm hoping is that I can block it and it will sit pretty, that I will lose a little bit of that height by stretching it a little bit in the width, and that it'll be close enough. So that's that. My acquisitions were obviously this. Highly recommend. If you haven't, Lane magazine is, at least here in Canada, is not cheap, but it is so worth it. There are so many patterns to knit out of every issue of this that has come out, and it is so beautiful to look at, and there's really great interviews and articles in there and all kinds of things. Highly recommend it. And while I was at my local yarn store, I also can't go in and not buy yarn, right? Can't do it. So I picked up a skein of yarn. That's what I was saying about, see me in pink? Pink is clearly going on with me right now. I saw this and I was just like, I have to have that. This is Olan yarn from Ireland. I have another skein of this, single skein of this in my stash. Plus I have a sweater's quantity of this as well, not in this color, but in the same yarn, which is her Donegal sock. It is a 80% merino. Where's that part of the tag here? Yeah, it's an 80% superwash merino and 20% Donegal neps. And I have a sweater's quantity in a beautiful variegated sort of pale blue, which I love. But then this, like I said, this called my name. I think this may have to do with really hoping that it will actually become spring soon, the vibrancy of this color. This is so pretty with this like hot pink and paler pink and salmony pink. all the pinky goodness in it. Love it. I don't know what I'm going to do with this, except that I feel like it needs to be like a cowl or gloves or mittens or fingerless gloves or something that showed off, not socks that are in my shoes that nobody but me gets to see, because it's so beautiful. It might be that will make a nice cowl. I would say hat, but I told you I don't wear hats that much. So anyway, that is, I believe, everything that is on my little show notes here and everything I had to talk to you about today. So I'm going to call it a day. I have to actually go to work in about an hour, so I kind of need to get my act in gear. And I hope that you have all had a great couple of weeks. And until I talk to you again, happy knitting.